out! You are not welcome here!
You need a home. My twins need you.
Sir, you want me to stay?
Yes, please stay.
Thank you, sir.
Thrown out by the billionaire's cruel mother, a penniless maid thought she had lost everything until the widowed tycoon found her in tears. Then he made a shocking proposal. You need a home, and my twins need you. But accepting him could change all their lives forever in ways unimaginable. The moment Mrs. Whitmore pointed toward the mansion doors, Emily knew she was finished. You were hired to clean this house, not become part of it, the billionaire's mother snapped, her voice cold enough to silence every servant in the hall. Pack your things and leave before my son comes home. Emily's hands trembled. She had nowhere to go, no family, no savings, not even enough money for a hotel. But what hurt most was leaving the twins, two grieving children who had clung to her since their mother died, calling for Emily whenever nightmares woke them. She walked out beneath a gathering storm with one suitcase and tears she refused to let fall. Then headlights swept across the driveway. James Whitmore stepped from his car, froze when he saw her, and demanded an explanation. Minutes later, after hearing what his mother had done, the widower did something no one expected. He followed Emily into the rain. "Come back," he said. She shook her head. "Your mother made it clear I don't belong here." James stared at her for a long moment, then reached inside his coat. What he pulled out made Emily's breath catch. It wasn't money. It wasn't a termination letter. It was a ring. "You need a home," he said, "and my twins need you." Emily stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. Then came the words that shattered everything she thought she knew. "Marry me." But James wasn't telling her the whole truth. His proposal had less to do with convenience than he claimed. His mother was hiding a secret about the twins, and someone inside the mansion desperately wanted Emily gone. Why had James chosen a poor maid to become his wife? What secret was his mother protecting? And what would Emily discover after saying yes? You believe kindness should never be measured by wealth, that a loving heart can matter more to a child than social status, and that no one deserves to be humiliated simply because they are poor. Kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the person society overlooks is the very person a broken family needs most. Stay with Emily, because the ring in James Whitmore's hand is only the beginning, and what is hidden inside that mansion could change everything. Emily Carter stared at the diamond as rain streamed down her face. For several seconds, she forgot the storm, forgot the suitcase beside her, forgot Margaret Whitmore standing beneath the mansion's portico with the rigid posture of a woman who had spent her entire life believing dignity meant never letting anyone see you tremble. Emily could hear only the rain striking the pavement and the echo of those two impossible words. "Marry me." James remained on one knee. His dark hair was soaked. Water ran from his jaw onto the collar of a suit that probably cost more than Emily had earned during 6 months of scrubbing marble floors, polishing silver, and quietly mending the torn, stuffed animals the twins refused to throw away. She swallowed. "You don't mean that." "I do. You're angry with your mother." "I am. And you feel guilty because she fired me." "That too." "Then stand up." Something passed across his face. "Not anger. Pain." "Emily." "Stand up, Mr. Whitmore." His eyes tightened at the formality. For almost a year, she had called him James whenever they were alone with the children. Tonight, she needed the distance. He rose slowly. The ring remained between his fingers. Behind him, Margaret's expression had changed. A woman who minutes earlier had seemed completely certain of herself now looked as if she had seen a ghost. "James," she said, "you have no idea what you're doing." He didn't look back. "That sentence has controlled half my life, Mother. And perhaps it prevented you from ruining the other half." Emily picked up her suitcase. I'm not going to stand here while the two of you fight over me. She turned toward the gates. James caught up within 3 steps. Where are you going? I'll figure it out. In this weather. I've survived worse. He stopped. The words had come out harder than she intended. But they were true. At 17, Emily had learned how quickly a home could disappear. Her father had already been gone for 5 years by then, leaving behind an unpaid mortgage, a garage full of broken tools, and a mother who still set a dinner plate for him every Sunday, as though Faith could become a man if she believed hard enough. Then cancer took her mother in 11 exhausting months. Emily remembered the final hospital bill more clearly than she remembered the funeral flowers. $43,000. She had sold the little blue house in Ohio, dropped out of community college, and spent the next 8 years moving wherever work was available. Hotel laundry, a nursing home kitchen, a daycare center, private housekeeping. She had learned not to become attached to addresses. Homes could be repossessed. People could leave. Promises could expire. But children were different. Children remembered who came when they cried. That was why leaving Noah and Lily hurt in a place she had spent years teaching herself not to feel. Emily. James' voice pulled her back. He was holding the ring out again. I'm not asking because I pity you. Then why? He looked toward the mansion. Margaret had disappeared inside. A curtain moved in an upstairs window. Emily noticed it. So did James. His expression sharpened. Not here. A chill moved through her that had nothing to do with the rain. What does that mean? Come back inside. Your mother just fired me. My mother does not employ you. She told me she did. She lied. Emily stared at him. James closed his fingers around the ring. And that, he said quietly, is only one of the things we need to discuss. The mansion's front doors suddenly opened. A small figure appeared between them. Emily. Lily. The 7-year-old girl ran barefoot into the rain, her pink pajama pants dragging against the wet stone. Noah came racing behind her. Margaret shouted from somewhere inside. Emily dropped her suitcase. Lily collided with her first. Her little arms locked around Emily's waist. Grandma said you left us. No, sweetheart. You did. I didn't want. Noah slammed into her other side. He was usually quieter than his sister. Since his mother's death, he often retreated into himself when frightened. Tonight he was sobbing so hard he couldn't speak. Emily sank onto her knees and held both children. James turned away. That tiny movement told her more than his proposal had. He didn't want his children to see him cry. She had seen that before. Months earlier. It had been the first night Noah called for Emily instead of his father. The boy had awakened screaming after dreaming about the hospital. Emily reached the nursery before James did and sat beside him until the panic passed. When James entered, he stopped in the doorway. Noah was curled against Emily's chest. Lily had climbed into the bed too. Emily remembered looking toward their father. James had been smiling, but his eyes were wet. The next morning, a vase of yellow tulips appeared in the servants' kitchen. No card. No explanation. Emily had known. She had also pretended not to. Now, kneeling in the rain, she realized something she had been refusing to understand for months. The children weren't the only ones who had become attached. Please don't go, Lily whispered. Emily closed her eyes. Over Lily's shoulder, she looked at James. He wasn't holding the ring out anymore. He simply waited. And somehow that made the decision harder. "I'll come inside," Emily said. Lily squeezed her tighter. "Forever." Emily's heart twisted. "For tonight." James looked away. But not before she saw disappointment cross his face. Inside the mansion, everything felt different. The same chandelier glittered over the foyer. The same grandfather clock ticked against the wall. The same portrait of James, late father, watched from above the staircase with painted disapproval. Yet Emily suddenly felt as though she had stepped into a house filled with locked doors she had never noticed before. Margaret waited in the library. So did Richard Whitmore. Emily stopped when she saw him. James' uncle had arrived 2 days earlier from Boston. He was polished, silver-haired, and always smelled faintly of expensive cigars despite claiming he had quit smoking. Richard controlled part of the Whitmore family trust and sat on the board of Whitmore Industries. He had barely spoken to Emily since arriving. But she had caught him watching her 3 times. Once through the reflection of a dining room mirror. Once from the landing while she helped Lily practice piano. And that afternoon, through the half-open door of James' study. Each time, he looked away before she could acknowledge him. Now he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Well," Richard said, "this has become theatrical." James handed Emily's suitcase to the butler. "Take the children upstairs, please." "No," Lily cried. Emily crouched. "I'm not leaving. Promise." The word struck deeper than it should have. Emily forced a smile. "I promise I'll still be here when you wake up." Noah studied her with unsettling seriousness. "Mom promised too." Silence fell. Emily felt James stiffen beside her. Noah immediately looked at the floor. "Hey," James said softly. He knelt before his son. "Your mother didn't choose to break that promise." Noah's lips trembled. "I know." James kissed his forehead. The butler led the twins away. Margaret watched them climb the stairs. For the first time that evening, her face softened. Then she looked at Emily, and the wall returned. "You cannot seriously be considering this," she said to James. "I'm not discussing my marriage with you." Richard laughed. Marriage, 5 minutes ago, she was a member of staff. Emily's cheeks burned. James turned toward him. "And 5 minutes from now, you can be outside my gates." "James," Margaret warned. "No, I have tolerated enough." Richard lifted both hands. "Fine," the angry son defending the innocent maid. Very romantic. Emily saw James' jaw tighten. Richard continued. "But perhaps before we celebrate, Miss Carter deserves to know why you happened to have an engagement ring in your coat." Emily looked at James. He went still. Margaret whispered, "Richard." "No," Richard said pleasantly, "she should know." Emily's stomach tightened. "Know what?" James remained silent. Richard leaned against the desk. "That ring belonged to Sarah." Emily's breath caught. James' late wife. The twins' mother. She stepped backward. James immediately shook his head. "That's not what he means." "It is," Richard asked. "The stone was Sarah's, the setting is new." Emily looked at the diamond again. Suddenly, it felt less like a promise and more like trespassing. "You had your dead wife's ring in your pocket." "Emily, listen to me." "Why?" "Because I had it reset." "For whom?" Silence. Her heart began to pound. Richard's smile disappeared. Margaret looked at her son in disbelief. James exhaled. "For you." No one spoke. Emily could hear the fire crackling behind her. You had it reset for me. 3 weeks ago. You planned this. I planned to ask you tonight. Margaret gripped the back of a chair. Richard's face became unreadable. Emily stared at James. You were going to propose to your maid. I was going to propose to the woman who brought my children back to life. The room seemed to shrink around them. James took a step closer. Before you came here, Lily barely spoke outside therapy. Noah slept under his bed because he said the mattress reminded him of the hospital cot Sarah died in. I was living in my office because every room upstairs reminded me that I had failed them. You didn't fail them. I did. No. I spent a year believing money could solve grief. His voice cracked slightly. I hired specialists, tutors, counselors, nannies. I bought every toy they touched in a store because I couldn't stand the silence in this house. He looked toward the doorway the twins had disappeared through. Then you arrived. Emily remembered her first day. She had been polishing the staircase railing when a wooden airplane struck her ankle. Noah was hiding behind a column. Instead of scolding him, Emily had picked up the plane and examined the broken wing. My brother had one like this, she told him. Noah had stared. Did he break it? All the time. Did your mom buy another one? No, we used glue. The next afternoon, Noah left the airplane on a kitchen stool beside a bottle of glue. No words. Just a request. Emily fixed it. 3 days later, he spoke to her. A week later, Lily did. James had noticed every small miracle. Emily hadn't realized how deeply. You made breakfast with them, he continued. You listened when Lily talked about Sarah. You never told them to stop crying. You never tried to replace their mother. His eyes met hers. You loved them without asking them to love you back. Margaret lowered her gaze. James' voice softened. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you too. Emily's throat tightened. Richard's expression changed. Just for a second. The charming mask vanished. What appeared beneath it was cold. Calculating. Then the smile returned. How touching. James turned. Get out. Before you throw me out, Richard said, perhaps ask your mother why she dismissed Miss Carter tonight. Margaret's face drained of color. James looked at her. Why did you? I told you this situation had become inappropriate. Richard shook his head. Oh, Margaret. Be quiet. You wanted her gone yesterday, why tonight? James' eyes narrowed. What happened tonight? Margaret said nothing. Richard straightened his cuffs. Emily suddenly remembered the afternoon. She had been cleaning the upstairs sitting room when she found Lily crouched beside a cabinet. The child was trying to reach something that had fallen behind it. A small brass key. Emily retrieved it for her. Where did this come from? Mommy's room. Emily froze. Sarah's private sitting room had remained locked since her death. Even the cleaning staff were forbidden to enter. Why do you have it? Grandma was looking for it. Did she ask you to find it? Lily shook her head. I heard Grandma and Uncle Richard fighting. Emily had gently taken the key. What were they fighting about? Lily shrugged. Mommy's box. At that moment, Margaret entered. When she saw the key in Emily's hand, her face changed. Not anger. Fear. 20 minutes later, Emily had been fired. Now the memory returned with such force that she looked directly at Margaret. The key. Richard stopped smiling. James turned to Emily. What key? Margaret whispered, Emily, don't. That was when Emily knew. Whatever was happening had never been about a maid crossing social boundaries. She reached into the pocket of her coat. I forgot I still had it. The little brass key lay in her palm. Richard's gaze fixed on it. James saw, and Emily saw James see. Where does it go? He asked. No one answered. James looked at his mother. Where's? Margaret sat down slowly. Sarah's writing desk. James' face changed. That desk has been locked since she died. I know. You told me the key was lost. I thought it was. Richard stepped toward Emily. I'll take that. James moved between them. No, you won't. A strange tension settled over the room. Emily looked from one wealthy face to another and suddenly felt she was witnessing the final scene of an argument that had begun long before she entered the Whitmore household. What is in the desk? She asked. Margaret closed her eyes. A letter. Richard snapped, Margaret. James turned. A letter from whom? His mother opened her eyes. Zero. James went pale. For 2 years, he had believed his wife's final words to him were spoken in a hospital room. Take care of our Barbies. He had replayed them 1,000 times. Sarah had been 34 when an undiagnosed cerebral aneurysm ruptured while she was attending a charity luncheon. She collapsed before dessert. By the time James reached the hospital, she was conscious only in brief fragments. She squeezed his hand once, asked about the children twice, and before surgery, she whispered the sentence that became the commandment by which he lived. Take care of our Barbies. She never woke again. Now his mother was telling him there had been a letter. What does it say? Margaret looked toward Richard. That was her mistake. James saw it. His voice dropped. What did you do? Richard scoffed. Don't be melodramatic. James walked toward Sarah's private sitting room. Everyone followed. The corridor felt longer than Emily remembered. Portraits of generations of Whitmores lined the walls, judges, industrialists, senators, philanthropists. People born into rooms where decisions made behind closed doors could alter thousands of lives. Emily had spent months dusting their frames. Tonight they seemed to watch her pass. James unlocked Sarah's room with the brass key. The smell struck him first. Lavender. Faint now but still there. He stopped in the doorway. Emily watched his shoulders rise. For a moment, he was not a billionaire, chairman, employer, or father. He was a husband entering a room his wife would never use again. I haven't been in here since the funeral, he said. No one answered. The room remained almost exactly as Sarah had left it. A book lay face down beside the window. A cream cardigan hung over a chair. There was a photograph of Noah and Lily on the writing desk, both children missing front teeth. James touched the frame. His hand trembled. Emily wanted to go to him. She didn't. Not yet. Margaret pointed toward a narrow drawer beneath the writing surface. The letter is there. James inserted the key. It turned. Inside was a wooden box. Richard suddenly moved. James caught his arm. Don't. James, there are legal documents inside that you do not understand. Then I'll enjoy learning. He opened the box. There were 3 envelopes. One addressed to James, one to Margaret, and one bearing 2 names. For Noah and Lily when they are old enough. James stared at his envelope. The handwriting alone nearly broke him. Sarah's handwriting. He opened it carefully. The first line made him sit down. Emily remained near the door. James read silently. His face shifted from grief to confusion. Then confusion became fury. What? Margaret covered her mouth. James looked up at Richard. She knew. Richard said nothing. She knew what you were doing. Emily's pulse quickened. What was he doing? James handed her the letter. She hesitated. It's private. Read it. Emily looked down. Sarah had written the letter 6 days before her death. She wrote that she had discovered irregularities in the Whitmore Children's Trust, a fund created by James' grandfather and transferred partly into Noah and Lily's names at birth. Richard, as co-trustee, had been quietly moving voting rights from the children's holdings into shell companies he controlled. It wasn't enough to steal the fortune immediately. But over time, he could gain effective control of Whitmore Industries. Sarah had confronted him. He threatened to portray James as emotionally unstable and seek temporary financial guardianship over the twins' assets. Sarah believed Margaret knew enough to stop him. But Margaret refused to expose the family publicly. One paragraph had been underlined twice. James, if anything happens to me, do not let Richard convince you that protecting the Whitmore name is the same as protecting our children. Emily lowered the page. You knew, James asked his mother. Margaret began to cry. Emily had never seen her cry. Not when speaking about Sarah's funeral. Not when Lily was hospitalized with pneumonia. Not even when James' father's portrait had been unveiled. Now tears slid silently down her face. I knew Sarah suspected him. Suspected. I didn't know how far it had gone. So you hid the letter. I found it after she died. And said nothing. You were barely functioning. They were my children. I was trying to save you. No, you were trying to save this family's reputation. Richard walked toward the door. James blocked him. You're staying. You have a grieving woman's accusations and nothing more. The trust can be audited. Richard smiled thinly. Then audit it. The confidence in his voice unsettled Emily. Too confident. He knew something they didn't. Her eyes went back to the box. 3 envelopes. But there was something beneath them. A folded document. She reached for it. Richard moved faster. No. He lunged across the desk. James caught him, and the 2 men crashed against a chair. Margaret screamed. Emily grabbed the paper. Richard shoved James aside. Give me that. For the first time, Emily saw the truth behind his polished smile. Not embarrassment. Not fear of scandal. Desperation. She backed away. James stepped in front of her. Touch her, he said, breathing hard, and I swear your trust problems will be the least of your concerns. Richard stopped. Emily unfolded the document. It was notarized. Sarah had named James sole guardian of the twins' personal welfare, unsurprising enough. But underneath was an amendment to their financial trust. If Richard were ever accused of misconduct by either parent, his authority as co-trustee was to be automatically suspended pending investigation. The signature beneath it belonged to Sarah. Another signature belonged to James. He stared at it. I don't remember signing this. Margaret whispered, You did. When? The week before Sarah died. She told you it was part of the annual estate package. James looked sick. You knew about this too. She asked me to witness it. Then why was Richard still controlling the trust? Margaret didn't answer. Emily understood first. You never filed it. Margaret closed her eyes. James stared at his mother. You hid it. I was afraid. Of what? Margaret looked at Richard. And suddenly, the old man laughed. A quiet, terrible laugh. Tell him. Margaret's shoulders sagged. Richard had proof your father had been diverting company money for years. James went motionless. My father. Your father was ill, the gambling had become worse, he borrowed from subsidiary accounts. Richard covered it. For a price. Margaret nodded. If Sarah's amendment was filed, Richard threatened to release everything, your father's reputation, the fraud, the debts. James stared at the portrait visible through the doorway. All his life, his father had been presented as a monument. Discipline. Legacy. Honor. At 12, James had once come home with a B- in algebra. His father had placed the paper on the dinner table and said, "A Whitmore never gives anyone a reason to question his competence." James remembered studying until 2 in the morning for weeks afterward. He remembered his mother standing in the hallway, watching, saying nothing. Now the perfect father had become another locked room. You protected him, James whispered. Margaret nodded. And Richard controlled you. Another nod. Even after Sarah died. Margaret's voice broke. I thought I could contain him. Richard sighed. This is becoming tiresome. Emily looked at him. You wanted me gone because Lily found the key. He smiled faintly. I wanted you gone long before that. Why? Because children talk. The answer chilled her. You listen to them, Richard continued. Most adults don't. That made you inconvenient. Emily remembered Noah mentioning a mean man on the phone in the study. Lily once asking why Uncle Richard wanted Daddy to go away and rest. Small statements Emily had dismissed because children often repeated fragments without context. Richard had been laying groundwork. James understood too. You were planning to have me declared unfit. Richard shrugged. Your grief was public. Your drinking afterward wasn't exactly private. Emily looked sharply at James. He didn't deny it. That was another hidden chapter. After Sarah's death, he had spent 3 months sleeping with a bottle beside the bed. He never became violent, never endangered the children. But he disappeared inside himself. Margaret took over household decisions. Richard took over more company decisions. By the time James stopped drinking and returned fully to work, authority had already shifted. Emily had arrived 6 months later. And slowly, the mansion changed. The children laughed again. James came home for dinner. He stopped sleeping in his office. He attended Noah's school concert. He took Lily ice skating. He began questioning financial reports again. Richard had watched every improvement and realized the grieving widower he needed was disappearing. You, James said to Emily. His expression held stunned realization. You ruined his plan. Richard rolled his eyes. Please. No, she did. The children got better. I got better. Emily thought of the vase of yellow tulips. The repaired airplane. James laughing when Lily covered his face in pancake flour. All those ordinary moments had threatened a man trying to build power from grief. Richard walked toward the door again. This time James didn't stop him. Instead, he took out his phone. Security. Richard froze. James gave instructions. 2 guards appeared within minutes. Richard's face reddened. You have no idea what you're starting. James looked at Sarah's letter. No, I'm finishing what my wife started. As the guards escorted Richard away, he turned toward Margaret. You think he'll forgive you? She flinched. He won't. Then he looked at Emily. And you think that ring makes you one of them? Emily said nothing. Richard smiled. Wait until the newspapers find out who you are. That sentence followed her into the night. By morning, they had. At 6:12 a.m., the first headline appeared online. Billionaire widower proposes to housemaid HOURS after family dispute. By 7:00, photographs of Emily were everywhere. One showed her carrying groceries. Another showed her collecting Noah from school. A third had been taken years earlier outside a county courthouse. That was the photograph that frightened her. James found her in the kitchen staring at it. What is it? Emily locked her phone. Nothing. You look terrified. I said it's nothing. James leaned against the counter. Richard told the press. Yes. He wants you humiliated enough to leave. Maybe that means I should. No. You don't get to decide. His face softened. You're right. Emily looked at him. The ring had disappeared. She was grateful and strangely disappointed. There are things about me you don't know, she said. Then tell me. She wrapped both hands around a coffee mug. When I was 22, I was arrested. James said nothing. Not convicted, arrested. For what? Theft. He waited. Emily stared into her coffee. My mother's medical bills destroyed what little money we had. After she died, I was working at a nursing home. One of the residents, Mrs. Parker, had dementia. Her daughter accused me of stealing a bracelet. Did you? No. I believe you. You didn't even hear the rest. I don't need the rest to believe you. Her eyes burned. She continued anyway. The bracelet turned up inside Mrs. Parker's sewing box 2 days later. Charges were dropped, but the arrest remained online. I lost the job. James' jaw tightened. Richard found it. He finds everything. That's what he'll use. He'll try. Emily laughed bitterly. You don't understand how this works. You're James Whitmore. If someone accuses you of something, you hire lawyers. If someone accuses me, people say they knew it all along. He had no answer. Because she was right. That afternoon, reporters gathered outside the gates. By evening, anonymous sources were calling Emily an opportunist. A gold digger. A calculating servant who had manipulated 2 vulnerable children to get close to their billionaire father. One television commentator asked why an untrained domestic employee had been allowed such emotional access to grieving children. Emily shut off the television. Lily had been standing behind her. What's a gold digger? Emily's stomach dropped. James entered before she could answer. Someone who works in a mine, he said. Lily frowned. Do you work in a mine? No. Then the lady on TV is dumb. James nearly laughed. Emily did. For 10 beautiful seconds, the house felt normal. Then Noah walked in carrying an envelope. This was under my door. James took it. There was no stamp. No name. Inside was a single photograph. Sarah. Alive. Standing beside Richard outside a bank. The date printed at the bottom was 3 days before her aneurysm. On the back, someone had written, "She knew more than the letter says." James stared at it. Who put this here? Noah's face crumpled. I don't know. Security cameras were checked. Nothing. No one had entered the hallway except family and staff. Someone inside the mansion was still working for Richard. For the next 2 days, suspicion poisoned everything. Every footstep sounded too quiet. Every door left ajar seemed deliberate. James ordered financial records examined and hired an independent forensic accountant. Margaret barely left her room. Emily refused to accept James' proposal. But she also refused to leave. Not while the twins were frightened. On the 3rd night, Noah crawled into her bed after midnight. Did Uncle Richard hurt Mom? Emily sat up. Why would you ask that? I heard Grandma. When? Before she made you leave. Emily's pulse quickened. What did you hear? Noah twisted the blanket between his fingers. She said Sarah was right about you. Uncle Richard said Sarah should have minded her own business. Emily felt cold. Anything else? Noah nodded. He said if Grandma didn't fix things, he would tell Dad about the lake. The lake? Noah's brow furrowed. I don't know. Emily tucked him against her. But one memory rose immediately. A photograph in Sarah's desk. Sarah and Margaret standing beside a lake house. On the back, Lake Winnipesauki, our last peaceful summer. The next morning, Emily approached Margaret. What happened at the lake? The older woman dropped her teacup. It shattered on the floor. Neither woman moved. Who told you that? Noah. Margaret went pale. He heard you and Richard. Children should not eavesdrop. Adults should stop hiding things that can hurt children. Margaret looked at her. For once, there was no contempt in her eyes. Only exhaustion. You think I hate you? You fired me into a thunderstorm. I suppose that answered the question. Emily almost smiled. Margaret didn't. The truth is more embarrassing. What truth? I was afraid of you. Emily blinked. Me? You arrived with nothing, no family name, no connections, no ambition anyone could exploit, and within months, my grandchildren trusted you more than they trusted me. Her voice became quieter. My son listened to you. That frightened you. I had spent 2 years convincing myself that control was the same thing as protection. Margaret looked toward the window. Then you walked into this house and protected them simply by being kind. Emily said nothing. Margaret's eyes filled. You made what I had been doing look exactly like what it was. And the lake. Margaret took a long breath. Sarah confronted Richard there. When? 2 months before she died. What happened? She had discovered he was moving shares. She wanted to call the authorities immediately. And you stopped her? Yes. Why? Because Richard threatened James' father. Emily's expression hardened. You already told us that. That wasn't the only threat. Margaret looked toward the doorway. He said he would destroy James too. How? After Sarah died, people assumed James began drinking because of grief. Emily waited. Margaret's hands trembled. He had been drinking before. Emily felt the pieces move. How badly? Bad enough. Did Sarah know? Yes. Was he dangerous? No, never to the children, never physically, but their marriage was struggling. Emily's heart sank. She had idealized Sarah and James because everyone in the mansion had. Margaret continued. At the lake, Sarah told me she was considering separation unless James got help. Emily looked away. The ring suddenly felt heavier, even though it wasn't on her hand. Did he? Yes, quietly, He stopped drinking before Sarah died. They were rebuilding their marriage. Then why hide it? Because Richard had photographs, hotel receipts, messages, enough to make James look unstable if released without context. And after Sarah died, he threatened to use them in a guardianship petition. Emily closed her eyes. This family had spent years hiding wounds, giving them time to rot. The secret wasn't that James was grieving, she said. Margaret shook her head. The secret was that Sarah had been preparing to protect the twins from all of us. All of you. Richard's greed, my obsession with appearances. Margaret's voice cracked. And James' inability then to admit he needed help. Emily thought of James kneeling in the rain. A proposal made from love could still carry unresolved grief. She needed the truth. That evening, she found him alone in Sarah's sitting room. He was holding the old photograph from the lake. "Your mother told me," Emily said. He closed his eyes. "About the drinking." "Yes." He nodded. "Aren't you going to defend yourself?" "No." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed." She stepped inside. Richard was right about one thing. James looked at her. "You don't know everything about me either." "No. I'm not Sarah." "I know. I can't rescue you." "I know that too. And marrying me won't magically fix this family. I'm counting on it not to." Despite herself, she smiled. James put the photograph down. "I loved Sarah. I know. I still love her." Emily's smile faded slightly. "I know." He stepped closer. "But loving someone who died does not prevent me from loving someone who is alive." Her eyes filled. "I had the ring reset because I didn't want to erase Sarah, and I didn't want to hand you her life either." He swallowed. "I wanted the stone to carry what was good forward while changing the part that belonged to the future." Emily looked at him. "That is either incredibly beautiful or emotionally complicated beyond reason." "Probably both." She laughed through her tears. He didn't reach for her. That restraint mattered. "When were you going to ask me?" she whispered. "After dinner that night. Before your mother fired me." "Yes." "Did she know?" "No." Emily suddenly understood something. Richard knew. James frowned. "How?" "He told us about the ring before you did." James' expression sharpened. Only 3 people knew the ring had been reset: James, the jeweler, and... He turned. "My assistant." Daniel Cole had worked for James for 9 years. He managed appointments, travel, sensitive documents. He had access to the house, to security schedules, to James' financial calendar, to information about the ring. James called security. Daniel's room was empty. His phone had been disconnected. But inside his desk, they found copies of trust statements and a keycard to Sarah's corridor. They also found a burner phone. The last number called belonged to Richard. The next morning, police arrested Daniel at Logan International Airport. He confessed within 48 hours. Richard had been paying him for nearly 3 years. The photograph under Noah's door had been meant to frighten James into believing Sarah's death might have involved foul play. It hadn't. Her aneurysm had been natural. Richard simply understood grief well enough to weaponize uncertainty. The financial investigation moved faster after that. Millions had been diverted. Shell companies unraveled. Emails surfaced. Richard was charged with fraud, conspiracy, and breach of fiduciary duty. Margaret agreed to testify. The newspapers that had mocked Emily suddenly changed tone. Now she was the housekeeper who exposed a billionaire fraud. Emily hated that headline almost as much as the others. "I didn't expose anything," she told James. "You found the key. Lily found the key. You kept it. Because your mother fired me before I could return it. So technically Mother exposed him." From across the breakfast table, Margaret looked horrified. Emily laughed. Then Margaret did something no one expected. She laughed too. It was the first crack in a wall built over decades. Weeks passed. The reporters eventually moved on. The audit continued. The children returned to school. The mansion grew quieter. But one question remained unanswered. The ring stayed in James' desk. He never mentioned it. Emily appreciated that. At least she told herself she did. Then one Saturday morning, she walked into the kitchen and found Noah and Lily constructing something from cardboard. "What is that?" "A house," Lily said. Emily examined it. 4 stick figures stood in front. One had yellow hair. One had black hair. 2 were smaller. There was also a crooked dog. "We don't have a dog," Emily said. "We will," Noah replied. "Will we?" Dad said maybe. "Traitor." James' voice came from the doorway. Noah grinned. Emily looked at the cardboard house again. One word was written above the door. "Home." Her chest tightened. Lily noticed. "Why are you sad?" "I'm not. You have sad eyes." Emily sat beside her. "When I was your age, I thought home was a place. What is it now?" Emily looked across the kitchen. At Noah. At Lily. At James. Even Margaret, visible through the doorway, arguing with a florist about hydrangeas. "I think it might be people." Lily considered this. "So if the house exploded, we would still have a home." James coughed. "Let's not test the theory." The children laughed. That afternoon, Emily drove into town alone. She visited a cemetery she had not seen in years. Her mother's grave sat beneath a maple tree. Emily knelt and brushed leaves from the stone. "I think I'm scared," she whispered. Wind moved through the branches. No answer came. Of course not. But memory did. Her mother at the kitchen table, bills spread everywhere. Her mother after chemotherapy, wearing a scarf Emily had bought at a discount store. Her mother squeezing her hand 3 days before dying. Don't let being afraid of losing people stop you from having people. At 22, Emily had thought it was just something dying mothers said. Now she understood. She had survived by becoming temporary. Temporary jobs. Temporary rooms. Temporary friendships. Even at the Whitmore mansion, she had kept one suitcase half-packed under her bed. Ready. Always ready. Margaret had thrown her out that night. But perhaps what terrified Emily most was not homelessness. It was that the mansion had become a home before she gave herself permission to admit it. When she returned, James was sitting alone on the front steps. No expensive suit. No chauffeur. No boardroom armor. Just jeans, a grey sweater, and a cup of coffee. "You disappeared," he said. "I came back." He smiled slightly. "Yes." Emily sat beside him. For a while, they watched the sun sink behind the trees. Then she said, "Ask me again." James froze. "What?" "You heard me." He set the coffee down. "Emily." "No rain this time." He laughed nervously. "I don't have the ring." You have $1 billion and a mansion with 47 rooms. Figure it out. He stood so quickly, she laughed. Wait. He ran inside. Emily covered her face. 30 seconds later, the front doors burst open. James returned. So did Noah. And Lily. And Margaret. And the butler. And 2 housekeepers. And somehow the cook. Why is everyone here? Emily demanded. James glared at Lily. I told you not to announce it. You ran through the house yelling, "Where's the ring?" Lily said. We figured it out. James turned back to Emily. His face was red. For once, the billionaire looked completely powerless. Emily loved him for it. He came down 1 step, then another, and knelt, the same way he had in the rain. But this time, there was sunlight. This time, Emily wasn't holding a suitcase. This time, no one was telling her she didn't belong. James opened the box. Emily Carter, you came into this house expecting nothing from us. She started crying. You gave my children patience when they were angry, comfort when they were frightened, and permission to remember their mother without feeling they were hurting me. Behind him, Lily began crying too. Noah whispered, "Don't cry yet." I can't help it. James smiled through his own tears. You gave me something harder. Emily wiped her cheek. What? A reason to stop hiding behind grief. His voice softened. I don't need you to save me. My children don't need you to replace their mother, and you do not need me to rescue you from poverty. He held out the ring. I'm asking because I want to build something with you that none of us has ever had enough of. Emily whispered, What? A home where love isn't conditional. Margaret covered her mouth. Emily looked at the ring, then at the twins, then at the mansion behind them. She thought about the night she had been forced through those doors with everything she owned in one suitcase. She thought about class, money, shame, the invisible lines people drew between those who served and those who were served. She thought of Margaret believing status could protect a family, Richard believing money could control one, James believing wealth could cure grief, and herself believing poverty meant she could never safely belong anywhere. All of them had been wrong. Yes, she said. James blinked. Yes. Yes. Lily screamed. Noah shouted. James stood and pulled Emily into his arms. The ring almost fell into the grass. Margaret caught it. Everyone stared at her. She looked down at the diamond in her palm. Then she stepped toward Emily. For one painful second, the past seemed to stand between them. Margaret held out the ring. I owe you an apology. Emily accepted it. Yes, you do. James inhaled sharply. Margaret surprised them both by nodding. I judged you because you had no money. Emily waited. I told myself I was protecting my family from someone who wanted what we had. Margaret's eyes filled. But Richard had everything society taught me to trust: education, wealth, our name. She glanced toward the house. And he nearly destroyed us. Then she looked at Emily. You had none of those things. Emily's throat tightened. And you protected my grandchildren when there was nothing in it for you. Margaret took Emily's hand. I was wrong about what makes someone worthy of belonging. Emily squeezed her fingers. I forgive you. Margaret started crying. But if you fire me from my own wedding, we're going to have a problem. Laughter broke through the tears. 6 months later, they married in the mansion garden. Not because James wanted spectacle. Because Lily insisted the hydrangeas deserved to attend. There were fewer than 70 guests. Emily wore a simple ivory gown. Noah carried the rings. Lily scattered so many flower petals that the aisle disappeared. Margaret sat in the front row. Beside her was an empty chair. Sarah's photograph rested on it. Emily had suggested that. When James saw it before the ceremony, he had turned away and cried. Later, during the vows, he looked at Emily with a kind of peace she had never seen on his face before. Not forgetting. Not replacing. Continuing. Richard eventually pleaded guilty to multiple financial crimes. The stolen assets were recovered. James restructured the children's trust so that no single relative could ever control it again. Margaret resigned from the family foundation board for a year and did something no one, least of all herself, expected. She began volunteering at a legal aid organization supporting domestic workers facing wage theft and wrongful dismissal. Emily teased her mercilessly. "You've become dangerous." Margaret replied, "I had an excellent teacher." Emily never returned to housekeeping. Not because she was ashamed of it. Quite the opposite. Using part of her new resources, she created the Carter House Foundation, which provided emergency housing and educational grants for domestic workers suddenly dismissed from live-in employment. She knew exactly what it felt like to stand outside a rich person's home with a suitcase and nowhere to sleep. She refused to let that humiliation become someone else's ending. A year after the wedding, Emily visited the foundation's first residence. A young woman named Rosa had arrived that morning after losing her housekeeping job. She sat on the edge of a bed, holding a garbage bag filled with clothing. "I can't pay," Rosa whispered. Emily sat beside her. "You don't have to. I'll pay you back. That's not why this exists." Rosa looked suspicious. People who had been treated badly often found kindness difficult to trust. Emily understood that too. "How long can I stay?" "Long enough to figure out what comes next." Rosa began to cry. Emily held her hand. For a moment, she saw herself again. The rain. The suitcase. The humiliation. Then she remembered headlights sweeping across the driveway. A man stepping into a storm. A ring in his hand. And words that had sounded almost insulting at first. "You need a home, and my twins need you." James had been wrong in one important way. Emily had not been the only one who needed a home. They all had. Margaret needed a home where she could stop protecting appearances and begin repairing relationships. James needed a home where grief did not have to be hidden. Noah needed one where remembering his mother did not frighten the adults around him. Lily needed one where love was not treated like a limited resource. And Emily needed a home where staying did not depend on making herself small enough not to threaten anyone. Years later, on the anniversary of the storm, Noah found the old suitcase in the attic. "Is this the one?" he asked. Emily looked up from a box of photographs. "The one what?" "The suitcase you had when Grandma kicked you out." From the other side of the attic, Margaret said, "Must we preserve the wording?" Lily laughed. "Yes." Margaret sighed dramatically. Emily opened the suitcase. Inside was the old maid's uniform she had worn that night. She had forgotten she kept it. Lily touched the sleeve. "Why didn't you throw it away?" Emily thought for a moment. "Because I never want to forget who I was before people started treating me like I mattered." Noah frowned. "You mattered then." Emily looked at him. The boy was older now. Taller. His mother's eyes. His father's stubbornness. "You're right," she said. I mattered then too. Margaret walked over. That was the lesson some of us took longer to learn. Emily smiled. They carried the suitcase downstairs. That evening, James found it beside the fireplace. He recognized it immediately. You kept that? Yes. Why? Emily looked toward the family room. Noah and Lily were arguing over a board game. Margaret was accusing both of cheating. A dog, the crooked cardboard prophecy, eventually fulfilled in the form of a golden retriever named Pancake, slept beneath the piano. Emily leaned against James. Because that suitcase reminds me that one terrible moment can look like an ending when it's actually a doorway. He kissed her forehead. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd come home 5 minutes later? Emily looked at him. Yes. What do you think? She smiled. I think Lily would have stolen a car and found me herself. From the other room came an outraged voice. I heard that. James laughed. Then his expression softened. I'm serious. Emily knew. So she answered seriously. If you had been 5 minutes later, maybe I would have reached the road. Maybe I would have spent the night at a bus station. Maybe pride would have kept me from returning. She looked down at her hands. But I also think life sometimes gives us one moment when we have to choose whether fear gets the final word. James squeezed her hand. You chose us. No. Emily looked toward their children. We chose each other. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. Not a storm. Just gentle summer rain. Lily ran to the glass. Mom, it's raining. Emily froze. Mom. Lily had called her that occasionally during the past year, usually without thinking. Each time, Emily felt the same quiet ache. Not because she wanted Sarah's place. Because she understood there was room in a child's heart for memory and new love at the same time. She walked toward the window. Noah joined them. James stood behind her. Margaret remained by the fireplace, smiling. Emily watched raindrops travel down the glass. Once rain had followed her out of this house as a dismissed maid carrying everything she owned. Now she stood inside as a wife, a mother, a daughter-in-law, a woman whose worth had not changed at all between those 2 nights, despite what the world might have assumed. That was perhaps the most important truth of all. Money had changed Emily's circumstances. It had never changed her value. A mansion had given her an address. It was love, truth, forgiveness, and the courage to stay that had given her a home. And somewhere upstairs, tucked safely inside Sarah's old wooden box, 3 letters remained. The final one was still sealed. For Noah and Lily, when they are old enough. Emily never asked what it contained. Neither did James. Some truths they had learned should not be stolen simply because curiosity made them tempting. They would wait until the twins were ready. Until then, the letter belonged to the future. And for the first time in years, no one in the Whitmore family was afraid of what the future might bring. Dear viewers, if Emily's journey touched your heart, remember the lesson hidden beneath all the wealth, secrets, and scandal. A person's bank account can tell you what they possess, but it can never tell you what they are worth. The maid everyone thought could be discarded became the woman who helped save a broken family, not because she was rich, powerful, or socially important, but because she listened, cared, stayed kind, and had the courage to love children who desperately needed someone to see their pain. Would you have forgiven Margaret after she threw Emily out? Do you believe James was right to propose to Emily even while he still carried love for his late wife? Should social class ever matter when 2 people genuinely love each other? And if you were Emily, standing in the rain with nowhere to go and a billionaire suddenly holding out a ring, would you have returned to that mansion or walked away forever? If you believe people should be judged by their hearts rather than their wealth or occupation, share your thoughts in the comments. And kindly subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more emotional stories about love, family, betrayal, second chances, and the hidden truths that can change a life forever.